Beneath the shattered sky's mournful shroud, a god of death, once crowned, now unbowed, surveys his fallen, his legions' disgrace, their defeat etched deep in the earth's cold face. From shadow's embrace his dark power swells, a chant through the night, like a wind from hells. With each whispered curse, the ground stirs, bereft, as he summons anew the undead, left deft. No longer mere pawns in a mortal's played game, these creatures rise fierce, with eyes of flame. The balance once broken now shifts 'neath their tread, for the era of living has quietly bled. A new kingdom looms on the brink of this night, where the undead god reigns in unhallowed light. His army, once fallen, now starkly reformed, in a world where the living will soon be transformed. So beware, ye still breathing, the tide has now turned, for the undead god marches, and his wrath unspurned. The rise of Necros. The battlefield lay silent, a grim tableau of defeat, where the remnants of the undead sprawled across the muddy ground. This was not an isolated scene. Nearby another battlefield told a similar tale. Here too, the undead had been vanquished, their forms scattered and broken under a bleak sky. They had become the weakest player in the supernatural struggle for dominance, their powers exploited and drained by others to bolster different, more powerful entities. Once feared, the undead now seemed on the brink of becoming an afterthought in the annals of supernatural warfare. As dusk crept across these desolate fields, a peculiar disturbance unfolded on one such abandoned battleground. The earth trembled slightly, unnoticed at first, then more insistently, from the center of the devastation. Amidst the bodies of his fallen warriors, the ground split, and a figure rose. This was no ordinary undead. This was Necros, the undead god, now embodying the form of what he ruled. Necros stood tall, his visage a terrifying blend of decay and divine wrath. He surveyed the field with a cold, contemptuous gaze. The sight of his race, once powerful and now reduced to mere tools by others, filled him with a dark fury. He sensed not only the physical defeats, but also felt the meddling of other gods in the affairs of his creations, the interference that had tilted the scales against his own. With a grim determination, Necros decided that the time had come to assert his dominion and restore the undead to their rightful place in the supernatural hierarchy. Raising his arms towards the darkening heavens, he chanted in a tongue forgotten by time. The air around him crackled with power, a stark contrast to the quietude of the battlefield. As he invoked his divine might, the fallen undead began to stir. One by one they rose, their eyes now glowing with the fire of the gods, his fire. Necros imbued them with a portion of his own divine essence, transforming these once defeated creatures into avatars of his wrath and will. The balance has changed, Necros proclaimed, his voice echoing like thunder over the fields. Since the emergence of the supernaturals on this earth, and the undead unleashed by man, a new balance within nature's world was formed, one where the undead now walked this earth, and I, Necros, will ensure their victory. With this new army of divinely empowered undead, Necros prepared to march. This time, he would not be a bystander in the supernatural conflicts. He would lead from the front, wielding power beyond comprehension, ready to tip the scales and rewrite the rules of engagement. The undead, under his direct command, would no longer be pawns, but key players in the shaping of the world's fate. The rise of Necros marked a new chapter in the supernatural wars, a chapter where the undead god would no longer tolerate the abuse and exploitation of his children. The night was about to witness the wrath of a god long thought defeated, and with him, the resurrection of the undead as a formidable force on the global supernatural stage. The unseen power. The morning was crisp and still in the woodland community, a hidden refuge tucked away from the chaos that often ruled the outer world. A scout, part of a small group responsible for patrolling the area, was the first to spot the danger. "Here comes another group of them," he shouted back to his comrades, his eyes fixed on a small cluster of figures shambling towards their position. "There's only around 10. We can take them easily," he confidently added. The scout group, comprising 5 members, was seasoned in dealing with such threats. The undead were a common nuisance, and this group had honed their skills in culling these creatures, turning their routine into an almost mundane chore. However, today was different. As the first scout approached the undead to deliver a blow that should have easily dispatched one of the figures, he paused, noticing something unsettling. "Their eyes are glowing," he muttered, an edge of uncertainty in his voice. He swung his heavy makeshift weapon, a large, crudely fashioned club, expecting the satisfying crunch of impact. Instead, his strike landed with a hollow thud, as if he had hit a solid wall of stone. The undead creature turned slowly toward him, its glowing eyes piercing the dim light of the forest. With unnerving strength, it grabbed the scout by the arm, lifting him off the ground as if he were no heavier than a child. The other members of the scout team rushed in, swinging their weapons with desperate intensity, but to no avail. Their blows seemed futile, barely causing the creature to flinch. One by one, the other undead creatures moved with unnatural speed and strength, grabbing the remaining scouts. The sounds of struggle were brief. The eerie power of these new undead left the scouts overwhelmed and powerless. From a distance, their screams cut through the quiet woods, sending a chilling warning to the hidden community, followed by a haunting silence that spoke of a grim fate. The small group of empowered undead continued their advance, moving with purposeful strides towards the heart of the hidden community. Their knowledge of its location, somehow precise and calculated, suggested a guiding force beyond mere instinct or random wandering. This encounter marked a terrifying realization for the community. The undead, once easily managed threats, had evolved into something far more formidable. The new strength they exhibited hinted at a darker influence, reshaping the landscape of power within the supernatural world. As the community braced for what was coming, a deep-seated fear took root. The balance had indeed shifted, and survival now depended on facing an enemy unlike any they had known before. The desecration of the graveyard. In the heart of the hidden woodland community, the early tranquility was shattered by the shrill blare of an alarm. A guard perched atop a lookout post barked down urgently. "A group of around 15 undead coming this way." The news sent a ripple of fear through the community. The undead, now increased by 5 since the last encounter, advanced with relentless determination towards the settlement. As the community's defenders rushed to their posts, weapons at the ready to repel what they expected to be another manageable skirmish, the approaching undead horde veered unexpectedly toward a small, sacred site adjacent to the community, a makeshift graveyard where the fallen members of the community were laid to rest, honored for their sacrifices in past battles of survival. The horde halted at the graveyard's edge, just as the sky rumbled ominously with thunder. Then, amidst the charged air, a chilling scene unfolded. A peculiar figure among the undead, distinct from the others in stature and presence, stepped forward. This was Necros, the undead god, his appearance signaling a dark turning of the tide. With a solemn yet sinister gesture, he raised his hand over the humble graves. Suddenly, the earth trembled, and a ghostly light emanated from beneath the soil. One by one, the graves began to stir, and the bodies of the community's fallen heroes rose from their eternal slumber. The sight of friends and family, now reanimated with blazing fiery eyes akin to their disturber, struck a deep chord of horror and betrayal throughout the community. As quickly as he had appeared, Necros vanished, leaving behind his newly risen army, the undead, with their ranks now grotesquely swollen by the community's own deceased, turned their hollow gazes toward the living, ready to assault the heart of the community. Disgusted and horrified at this profound desecration, the community's guards charged forward to meet the undead with grim resolve. However, their efforts were futile. Their weapons seemed to merely glance off the resilient forms of the undead. One by one, the guards fell, overwhelmed by the supernatural strength of their foes. Mere moments later, those who had fallen rose again, their eyes now alight with the unholy fire of Necros's will, augmenting the ranks of their assailants. In the chaos, the remaining onlookers within the community scrambled to respond. Orders were shouted to lock the gates, but panic had already taken root. As the undead marched inexorably closer, the gates of the woodland community were sealed with trembling hands. The sounds of the approaching undead, a grim march of doom. Inside the walls, the community members gathered, faces pale and hearts pounding with dread. The betrayal of seeing their once valiant defenders, now part of the undead horde, was a psychological blow as crushing as the physical threat looming outside. They braced themselves, knowing that the battle for their survival had taken a dreadful turn. With the enemy now bolstered by their own, the night was set to be long and survival uncertain, as they faced an enemy reborn from their own ranks. The fall of the woodland camp, the relentless battering against the gates, resonated through the woodland community like the ominous drumbeats of an ancient war. Each thud, stark and powerful, was akin to a battering ram smashing into the ancient timbers, powerful and unstoppable. As more undead joined the assault, the force of their combined might became overwhelming. It was not long before the once sturdy gates, which had stood as a beacon of refuge and safety, crumbled and splintered under the supernatural strength of the undead horde. As the gates gave way, the last bastion of hope for the woodland camp's survivors faltered. The small group of remaining defenders, armed with whatever weapons they had scavenged, mounted a desperate resistance. But it was in vain. The new power possessed by the undead, augmented by Necros's divine wrath, was beyond anything the world had previously witnessed. The undead swept through the breaches in the gates like a plague, unstoppable and insidious. The defenders, their numbers already thin from previous skirmishes, and their spirits battered by the sight of their fallen friends turned foes, fought bravely but hopelessly. One by one, they were overwhelmed, not just by the physical might of their attackers, but by the horrific realization of their own impending doom. In the chaos, the tragic story of the undead's resurgence unfolded, a tale of human hubris and supernatural envy. The undead, originally reanimated by man's corruption and relentless experimentation with viruses in a misguided quest for eternal life, had once been a controlled group, relegated to the shadows of myth and nightmare. However, as the elders, driven by their own desperate search for power, began to meddle and siphon the inherent powers of the undead, they inadvertently destabilized the delicate balance of supernatural forces. Necros, the god of the undead, had watched as his creations were exploited and diminished, their powers stolen to bolster the elders' fading might. This desecration had not gone unnoticed or unchallenged. Now, with the return of Necros, A sinister correction was underway. He was not just reclaiming the stolen vitality of his followers, he was reshaping the very fabric of the supernatural hierarchy. As Necros manipulated the balance in retribution for the interference of other supernatural gods, the world was forced to witness the consequences of its own actions. Actions that had brought back the undead into a new era of domination. The woodland community, once a sanctuary of human resilience and hope, became a stark testament to this new reality. The night air was filled with the sounds of despair and destruction as the undead, fueled by divine vengeance, claimed the camp in the name of their once forgotten god. As the last of the resistance faltered, the survivors of the woodland camp were left with a grim choice: flee into the uncertain safety of the dark woods, or succumb to the merciless will of the undead. The legacy of mankind's ambition and the elders' greed had come full circle, leaving a world teetering on the brink of a new dark age, governed by the resurrected power of the undead. Elder led his newly formed cadre of elders through the darkened woods, their shadows merging and stretching as they moved silently towards their target, a human community reputed to be both well hidden and well stocked. Before they broke through the tree line, Elder paused, his voice a whisper that carried through the night. "We shall all feed well tonight, my brothers and sisters, for this camp is rich with the living." As they emerged from the shadows on the outskirts of the woodland community, Elder's anticipation turned to confusion. The gates, usually secure and bustling with activity, were smashed open, hanging off their hinges. There was no sign of struggle, no sounds of life, just an eerie silence that draped over the area like a heavy shroud. He and his group of elders entered the community, which was typically alive with the hustle of human activity. Now it lay deserted. The place was empty. Not a soul stirred. No bodies, living or dead, were to be found. "What is this?" Elder exclaimed, his voice echoing through the abandoned lanes. "I know this place was full of humans. What could have happened?" One of the elders, a keen-eyed vampire named Morven, noted a peculiar detail. "All the bodies in the graveyard have been taken," he reported, his voice low and measured. Elder's mind raced as he processed this information. "Someone got here before us. Someone is taking our stock for themselves," he concluded, his voice tinged with anger and a growing sense of urgency. The thought of another force, powerful enough to clear out an entire community and its graveyard, was both a challenge and a threat to his authority. "I will find out who and put an end to them," Elder declared with a cold finality. His resolve hardened, and his eyes glinted with a predatory gleam. This unexpected turn of events would not deter him. Rather, it stoked the fires of his ambition. Whoever was responsible had unwittingly ignited a new conflict, one that Elder was now eager to engage in. With the night deepening around them, Elder gathered his group of elders. They would need to regroup and gather information. The desolation of what was once a thriving human sanctuary had become the first clue in uncovering a new adversary. Elder knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger and discovery, but he was ready. The game of power and survival was evolving, and he was determined to emerge victorious, no matter the darkness he would have to traverse. The confrontation at the warehouse. Sometime later, Elder returned to his hideout, an abandoned warehouse that had become the clandestine meeting place for his cadre of elders. Inside, he found Serana poring over old texts and maps, searching for any clue that might explain the mystery of the deserted woodland community. Elder relayed the disturbing details of the empty village and the missing bodies, prompting a deep discussion about potential adversaries and the unsettling new dynamics at play. As they debated, a sudden commotion outside the warehouse disrupted their conversation. Peering out through the grimy windows, they spotted a small group of shambling undead approaching their hideout. Elder, irritated by the interruption, snapped, "Someone kill those things, will you?" Expecting a swift resolution, one of the newer elders launched his shadow form at the undead, a technique that had always proved lethal. However, this time, the shadow collided with the undead like hitting a solid wall. The impact was jarring, and the elder was repelled back, stunned and bewildered. "What?" Eldor exclaimed in disbelief. Before they could recover from the shock, the undead seized the opportunity. They advanced, grabbing the disoriented elder and lifting him off the ground as if he weighed nothing. In a panic, the elder transformed into shadow and retreated hastily to Eldor's side. As the undead continued their relentless advance, Serana stepped forward. "Let me try," she declared, slipping into the shadows to reappear behind the undead. She attempted her usual shadow manipulation techniques, but to her frustration, nothing happened. Remembering the silver knife she always carried, Serana swiftly pulled it out and drove it into the head of one of the undead. The creature fell instantly, lifeless to the ground. Serana turned to Eldor with a triumphant smile. "Silver," she whispered through the shadows. She moved like a wraith among the undead, her silver blade flashing in the dim light. One by one, she dispatched the undead, the silver knife disrupting whatever force animated them. Back inside the warehouse, after the immediate threat was neutralized, Serana explained her observations. "Simple physics," she began, cleaning her silver blade. "Silver disrupts the flow of energy within these creatures. A metal like iron consists of positive metal ions and negative electrons that move around the solid between the ions. Silver, having a similar conductive property, seems to interfere with whatever energy animates these undead. It's not just a mythical weakness, it's a disruption of their fundamental energy flow." Eldor listened intently, processing the implications. If silver could disrupt the undead in such a manner, it offered a new weapon and a new strategy against their rising power. This knowledge was a valuable asset, and Eldor knew that leveraging it could tip the scales in their favor in the unfolding supernatural conflict. As they pondered their next moves, the elders realized that the world they knew was rapidly changing, and they would need to adapt just as quickly to survive and reclaim their dominance. Elder convened a meeting with his elders, discussing the shifting dynamics of their supernatural world. They gathered around an old rugged table, the dim light of candles casting long shadows on the walls. "As we've seen," Eldur began, his voice carrying the weight of urgency, "the undead and the Lycan are actively increasing their ranks using humans as stock. It seems we are all converging on a similar strategy." One of the elders, a wise vampire named Martellus, nodded in agreement. "It's true. Every human camp and emerging community becomes a potential reservoir to bolster our numbers. It appears that whoever finds these humans first gains a significant advantage." Eldor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "This battle will ultimately be won or lost based on how effectively we can convert these humans into our kind. The humans are the ingredient that will determine victory or defeat in this supernatural war." Back at the fort, Captain Harris, Samantha, and Commander Lewis stood surveying the progress of the repairs and enhancements to their defenses. They were remarkably efficient this time around. "There really wasn't that much damage, and most of the defenses were easily rebuilt," Captain Harris remarked, with a hint of relief. As night descended over the fort, Cast in its veil of darkness, a guard on duty spotted something unusual in the distance. "Over there," he shouted, pointing towards the horizon, where a group of shuffling figures was slowly emerging. The burning fire in their eyes was unmistakable. "Undead!" he called out again, his voice tense. The fort sprang into action, every defender ready in their weapons, prepared to protect their reclaimed sanctuary. But as the undead drew closer, the guard noticed another group, barely visible in the shadows. It was the elders, 5 of them, engaging the undead in a fierce and chaotic battle. Captain Harris, watching the scene unfold from atop the fort walls, was bewildered. "What is this?" he exclaimed. "Are they actually helping us?" Commander Lewis, joining him at the lookout, squinted towards the battle. "It seems so," he responded thoughtfully. Samantha, ever the strategist, chimed in with a dose of skepticism. "Or maybe they're fighting over who gets the first bite of us," she suggested, her eyes not leaving the melee below. The battle between the super undead and the elders was fierce and brutal. The fort's inhabitants watched as one of the elders fell, overwhelmed by the sheer strength of these enhanced undead. It was a stark display of the power these creatures possessed. However, the remaining elders, though clearly exhausted and drained, eventually gained the upper hand. After a grueling fight, the elders managed to subdue their undead adversaries, but did not linger to celebrate their victory. Instead, they vanished into the night, leaving behind a battlefield strewn with the fallen, a testament to the ferocity of the conflict. The people of the fort were left in a state of mixed relief and confusion. The elders' intervention had inadvertently protected them, but the motive behind it remained unclear. Was it a mere coincidence, or part of a larger strategy? As the night wore on, the residents of the fort remained vigilant, aware that the line between ally and predator in this new world was as thin as ever. Clash of titans. In the dense woodlands, the Alpha ran with its pack, a blur of motion under the canopy. Amidst the rhythmic sounds of paws against the earth, a deep, primal call resonated within the Alpha, a voice more felt than heard. This ancient summons spoke of urgency and purpose. The Lycan must grow their ranks. The Alpha was to use its cursed bite to convert humans into Lycan, for a war was brewing, a war of the supernaturals where speed and strength would determine survival. As the voice echoed through the woods, it warned of the undead and elders who were also amassing their forces, each looking to bolster their armies with the living. Sensing a nearby human community through their heightened senses, the pack adjusted their path, their pace quickening with purpose. Approaching the edges of a small settlement recently constructed, from the survivors of other communities, the Lycan observed a grim scene. At the gates, a group of undead was already engaging in what appeared to be an attempt to breach the defenses. Unlike any undead they had previously encountered, these possessed a formidable, godlike aura. The Alpha, leading the pack from the front, didn't hesitate. With a powerful leap, it pounced on the first of these enhanced undead creatures. A tremendous swipe from the Alpha sent the creature flying, an attack that would have felled any ordinary foe. Yet, astonishingly, the undead rose again, its eyes burning with an unnatural fire as it counterattacked. The ensuing battle tested the Alpha's agility and strength as never before. After a fierce struggle, the Alpha managed to dispatch this formidable opponent. However, more undead pressed forward, slow but immensely powerful. Each blow they landed carrying the potential to seriously injure even the strongest Lycan. The pack rallied around the Alpha, engaging the undead with ferocity and precision. Normally, a skirmish with such odds would have been decisively quick, but these undead were different. Though the Lycan eventually overcame their adversaries, the toll was heavy. Fatigued and requiring time to heal, the pack could not afford another immediate confrontation. The small human community, witnessing this supernatural battle, watched in disbelief. Their fate hung in the balance, subject to the outcome of these violent encounters. As the Lycan retreated to their den for much-needed recovery, the humans were left to ponder their precarious position in a world where they were but pawns in a larger, more brutal game. The community's leaders gathered to discuss their options. With supernatural forces vying to claim them, they needed to fortify their defenses and perhaps seek alliances that could offer some semblance of protection. As night fell over the settlement, the air was thick with tension and uncertainty. The battle may have ended for the moment, but the war, the great war of the supernaturals, was just beginning, and every living soul was at risk of being swept away in its tides. The precarious balance. As the dust settled from the latest skirmishes, a deep unease permeated the air, touching all the corners of the supernatural and human worlds alike. The relentless battle to expand their ranks among the undead, Lycan, and elders had inadvertently disrupted the delicate balance of nature. This imbalance prompted a critical question. What would happen if one supernatural faction became too dominant? Could the natural order survive such a shift, or would it precipitate far worse consequences? Elder, in his pursuit of power, had used the undead's energy for his own gain, not fully understanding the consequences. His actions had not only exploited a vulnerability in the supernatural ecosystem, but had also invited the attention of higher, more powerful beings. This interference had now set the stage for potential calamity, affecting all who dwelt within this increasingly volatile environment. As the supernatural entities vied for dominance, the human survivors found themselves caught in an ever-tightening vice. The fort, under the leadership of Captain Harris, Samantha, and Commander Lewis, stood as a beacon of human resilience. But for how long? And what of the other scattered enclaves, like the camp led by Alex, Captain Knox, and Alana? Their struggles to survive and rebuild amidst such overwhelming odds painted a stark portrait of human vulnerability in a world that no longer favored them. The chapter closes with these pressing questions. Who will manage to build their ranks first among the supernatural factions? And amidst these titans clashing, what chance do the humans have to survive, let alone thrive? Teasing the next part of the saga, Crimson Dawn Part 8 promises to explore these very dilemmas. The undead, Lycan, and elders are on a collision course, with each faction desperate to assert its dominance. Meanwhile, Marco, Nina, and Rachel embark on a crucial mission to unite the disparate human camps. Their journey is one not just of survival, but of finding a way to gain an edge. In a world that seems increasingly inclined to grind humanity underfoot. In the next installment, readers will dive deeper into the chaos and power struggles of a world where supernatural forces collide with the indomitable spirit of humanity. Will the natural balance be restored, or will the actions of a few tip the scales towards a darker, irreversible future? Find out in Crimson Dawn Part 8, where the fate of all hangs precariously in the balance. echoes of the past. Marco, Nina and Rebecca approached the serene outline of a small island set in the middle of a tranquil lake. The island, covered with the remnants of what once might have been a thriving camp, looked desolate and long abandoned. As they surveyed the shore from the mainland, Marco decided to swim across to ensure it was safe before bringing Nina and Rebecca over. After a brief swim, Marco found a small boat hidden among the reeds on the island's shore. He paddled back and ferried Nina and Rebecca to the island. They stepped onto the island with a mix of curiosity and caution, scanning the remnants of what seemed like a last stand. The camp was a shadow of its former self, the structures battered and weather-worn, suggesting abandonment many months, perhaps even years ago. It was clear that humans had once thrived here. The layout was well organized with communal areas, sleeping quarters, and defensive positions. However, the signs of a violent struggle were unmistakable. Doors bore deep claw scratches, and broken weapons littered the ground. Yet there were no bodies, just the silent testimony of those who once lived there. As they delved deeper into the ruins, Nina discovered a stack of mouldy books and papers in what appeared to be the remains of a library or study area. Among these, she found an old, handwritten journal, the pages brittle and yellowed with age. She carefully flipped through the entries, which chronicled the daily struggles of the island's inhabitants against the relentless threats that haunted their world. The last entry in the journal caught her attention. It spoke of a small group from another camp, led by someone named Captain Knox, arriving at the island. The entry detailed discussions about a camp where vampires defended humans, hinting at a sanctuary unlike any other. Rushing over to Marco with the journal in hand, Nina exclaimed, "Look here, we must be on the right track." Marco took the journal, his eyes scanning the faded handwriting. "Yes, but how long ago was this? This place has been deserted for a long time, and it looks like something came through here, something angry. These marks are massive." Rebecca, who had been quietly exploring the perimeter, chimed in. "Captain Knox was the leader at our old facility. Maybe she found that base. Maybe she found the vampires." After a moment of thoughtful silence, Marco decided, "We'll camp here for the night. It seems safe enough, and we'll keep going in the morning." The trio settled in, taking refuge in one of the less damaged structures. As they prepared for a night's rest amidst the ruins, the silence of the island offered a deceptive peace, belying the turbulent and violent history etched into every corner of the camp. That night, as they rested, the weight of their journey and the clues they had uncovered settled around them. The past echoed through the abandoned camp, and the promise of answers lay just on the horizon. Unexpected reunion. As Marco, Nina, and Rebecca left the island, they continued their relentless search for the mysterious camp where vampires were said to protect humans. The day was long and scorching, the sun beating down unmercifully as they trudged through the underbrush. Exhausted, the trio finally sat down to rest under the sparse shade of a few scattered trees. "There's just nothing?" Marco sighed, frustration evident in his voice. As he wiped the sweat from his brow, Nina tilted her head, her expression changing. "Wait," she said, her voice hushed. "Do you hear that? Is that a motor?" The trio ducked down instinctively as they saw a vehicle in the distance. The faint sound of rock music floated through the air, growing louder as the vehicle approached. Through his binoculars, Marco could make out two people in the rebuilt vehicle. "Give me those," Rebecca demanded impatiently. She snatched the binoculars from Marco and peered through them. Without a moment's hesitation, she stood up and began running towards the vehicle, arms waving wildly. "Get down," cried Nina, her voice laced with anxiety. We don't know who they are." At first, the vehicle did not seem to notice Rebecca. Then abruptly, it stopped. One of the occupants pointed in Rebecca's direction. "Too late now," Marco muttered resignedly as he and Nina stood up. The vehicle edged closer, and Rebecca shouted with recognition, "Captain Knox! It's me, Rebecca!" The vehicle screeched to a halt, and a woman stepped out, her presence exuding a palpable sense of strength and authority. "Rebecca, I thought you were gone," said Captain Knox, her voice filled with surprise and relief. A man also exited the vehicle, a figure of imposing stature with broad shoulders, who offered a warm, reassuring smile. "This is Alex," Captain Knox introduced. "How have you survived all this time?" Captain Knox asked Rebecca. "I had friends," Rebecca replied, glancing back at Marco and Nina with a grateful smile. Captain Knox then turned to introduce herself and Alex properly. Marco seized the opportunity. "We're looking for a camp where vampires defend the humans. We need help." Captain Knox exchanged a knowing look with Alex. "We'd better get you back to camp. It's a fair journey, but this vehicle has handrails and somewhere to stand. We should be fine," she said decisively. "I'll explain everything back at camp." With that, the group climbed aboard the robust vehicle, the music resuming as they set off through the wilderness. The chance meeting had rekindled a spark of hope in Rebecca, and for Marco and Nina, it felt like a significant breakthrough in their quest. As the landscape sped by, each of them prepared for the revelations that awaited at Captain Knox's camp, where the complex web of supernatural alliances and enmities promised to become even more entangled. Under siege. As the vehicle neared the camp, a sudden commotion erupted just beyond the perimeter. About 20 undead, their eyes blazing with an unnatural fire, were launching a ferocious assault on the camp's defenses. "Let's lay low until the guards finish these off," Captain Knox whispered, motioning for everyone to stay quiet and low in the vehicle. From their vantage point, Marco and his companions could see the camp's guards springing into action. Despite the daunting appearance of the undead, the camp's defenses, reinforced with lines of shiny silver along the walls and barricades, proved formidable. The guards, equipped with weapons coated in silver, engaged the attackers. It was clear that these weapons, originally designed to defeat the Lycan, were now a crucial repellent against this new breed of fiery-eyed undead. Marco observed with interest how the silver barriers seemed to immediately affect the undead, slowing their advance significantly. The guards capitalized on this advantage, finishing off the creatures with precise strikes to their heads with the silver-coated weapons. Alex, noticing Marco's confused look, leaned over to explain. "Haven't seen these ones before?" he asked, his voice low. "They just started popping up everywhere. They can't be stopped in the usual way, but silver seems to be effective. They're still as strong as 10 men, but when they come in contact with silver, it seems to slow them down, and a silver strike to the head is lethal, but don't try to take them on hand to hand." After the last of the undead fell, the vehicle finally entered the camp, the gates shutting firmly behind them. Inside, the atmosphere was tense but relieved, as the immediate threat had been quelled. Captain Knox quickly arranged a meeting with key figures of the camp: Eleanor, the camp leader, Sarah, the engineer, and themselves. Marco, Nina, and Rebecca were introduced, and Marco took the opportunity to explain their mission. "We're seeking aid for our camp, overwhelmed by undead and elders," Marco detailed, his voice carrying a mixture of urgency and hope. Captain Knox nodded gravely, her expression serious. "If there's more than 100 of those undead at a time, we would be in serious trouble," she admitted, highlighting the precarious balance of their security. Nina, curious about the earlier discussion, asked about the vampires. What about the vampires that were said to defend the humans here? Alex responded with a somber tone. They are all dead. They sacrificed themselves to save us. We are alone here. The revelation cast a shadow over the group, underscoring the gravity of their situation. The meeting concluded with plans to fortify the camp further and explore potential alliances or strategies that could help them withstand the growing supernatural threats. As they dispersed, Marco, Nina, and Rebecca absorbed the stark reality of their new allies' struggle, realizing that their journey was not just about survival, but about forging a path forward in a world where old protectors had fallen and new menaces reigned. Unseen forces at play. How did you manage to get here? Captain Knox asked, her tone a mix of curiosity and concern. The group sat around a sturdy table in the command tent, the air thick with the musty scent of canvas and the lingering tension of the recent undead attack. Marco leaned forward, his face etched with the fatigue of their long journey. We'd heard of your camp through rumors and set out for aid. We were captured by cannibals and managed to escape. Then a man in a shiny mask pointed us in this direction. A man in a chrome mask? Alex interjected, his brow furrowing in concern. Yes, Marco confirmed. I don't know for sure where he is now, but he was keen to meet the Lycans at our base. Captain Knox and Elena exchanged a glance that carried a weight of unspoken knowledge. His name is Winter, and if he's headed to your base, he'll either save it or destroy it. I don't think there's anything that can stop him, Elena said with a somber tone. Alex looked over at Eleanor, his concern evident. Do you think Winter can stop these new undead? Stop them? Elena shook her head slightly. I'd bet everything that he has something to do with them. His motives are known only to him, but I know one thing. The further away from us he is, the safer we are. Nina, who had been quietly absorbing the conversation, suddenly interjected. But if he's at our base now, we need to get back and help them. Alex responded gravely. Nothing you can do could stop him. Of all the threats now facing our world, he is by far the worst and most powerful. Meanwhile, far away in a distant city that once thrived as a metropolis for the undead, where a once powerful necromancer ruled, a handful of undead began to stir. These undead had a fire laced in their eyes, a sign of a divine and sinister awakening. The air was thick with the essence of godly interference. Necros, the god of the undead, was building his army. His presence felt more potent than ever as he scoured the lands for his fallen kin. With each undead he raised, he instilled a portion of his divine power, reconstructing them in his image, strong, powerful, and terrifying. As the shadows lengthened and the night deepened, the world seemed to hold its breath. The actions of powerful beings like Winter and Necros were reshaping the landscape of power. Back at the camp, as Elena, Captain Knox, Alex, Marco, Nina, and Rebecca planned their next steps, the stakes were clearer than ever. The supernatural forces were not only clashing with each other, but were also drawing the humans into their vortex of power struggles and ancient vendettas. The question of survival was no longer just about fighting the visible enemies, but understanding the unseen forces at play. Resurrection and intrigue. In the desolate remains of what was once a bustling metropolis for the undead, Necros, the god of the undead, sensed a great presence, a follower potent enough to lead his burgeoning army. Yet, this promising leader was nowhere to be found within the vast, empty city. Necros, driven by a desire to harness this power, extended his supernatural senses across the sweeping plains that stretched beyond the city's limits. Suddenly, he halted, his focus sharpening on a distant location. With a ripple through the earth, he vanished, re-emerging not far from the camp where Ilana, Alex, and Captain Knox resided. Here the aura of the being he sought was unmistakable, powerful, and brimming with intelligence. Necros yearned to claim this formidable undead for his own ranks. Scanning the horizon once more, Necros pinpointed the exact source of the energy. Disappearing again into the ground, he surfaced inside a small house that had been converted into a makeshift laboratory. There, among various scientific paraphernalia, lay the severed head of Stephen Lestat, a renowned necromancer whose experiments had once sent ripples through the supernatural community. Despite the evident experimentation, the head remained eerily pristine. Necros, surrounded by a group of his newly raised undead, observed their reverence as they bowed before him. His gaze swept over them, selecting one without a moment's hesitation. With a swift, ruthless motion, he decapitated the chosen undead, its body crumpling to the ground. Necros then placed Lestat's head onto the fresh corpse. Uttering incantations in a language unknown to the living world, he watched as the body twitched and rose, now powered by Lestat's head, whose eyes ignited with a fire far more intense than any of the others. The necromancer had returned, now reborn as a servant to Necros, his eyes ablaze with renewed purpose and a sinister obedience. Meanwhile, in the shadows just outside a small safe house, Winter observed the night sky. He sat concealed, his presence nearly imperceptible, as he watched the distant flickers of supernatural activity. With a knowing smile, he muttered to himself, "Excellent. Everything is as it should be." Winter's cryptic words hung in the air, hinting at deeper machinations and a grand design that was slowly unfolding. The resurrection of Lestat and the movements of Necros were not mere coincidences, but part of a larger, more ominous strategy. As the supernatural forces continued to maneuver and align, the fate of the human survivors and their would-be protectors grew ever more uncertain, woven into a tapestry of power plays that promised to reshape the world. Divine bargains and ancient powers. At the undead metropolis, Lestat wasted no time returning to the laboratory. Empowered by Necros's influence, he resumed his work on biological and genetic enhancements for the undead. His previous experiments had failed him, but now, fueled by the godly energy, he felt a renewed vigor to pursue his ambitious projects. Meanwhile, back at the Elder's safe house, Elder and his followers had constructed a shrine to their vampire god. There, in the dimly lit sanctuary, Elder spoke the dark tongue of the night and shadows, a language that had not been heard for centuries. "You helped us before. We, your servants, beg an audience. The undead are being manipulated. They grow stronger each day. We need to build our ranks, but they are everywhere, aided by a higher power. We need help if we are to survive." In response to Elder's invocation, the vampire god appeared before him. His form was both majestic and terrifying, a being of immense power that seemed to darken the already shadow-filled room. "I know that Necros walks this earth, interfering in the affairs of mortals and supernaturals." The vampire god spoke with a voice that seemed to echo through the ages. "But his freedom to act comes from your own actions, Elder. You tapped into the undead's power for your own gain. We must not steal the powers of others." The vampire god then explained the delicacy of the universal balance. The more we gods interfere, the more fragile this balance becomes. Should it break, this world along with all gods will be destroyed. I dare not disrupt this balance further. Elder, his face etched with worry, responded, "And what of Necros? He is now free to gain the upper hand by empowering his undead. We need help, or we will cease to be. Would this not also disrupt the balance?" The vampire god looked at Elder thoughtfully. "Very good. I see why you have survived. You do not need more elders to win this battle. You just need one more. I will bargain with death. If it's at all possible, I will send him to you." Elder, his interest piqued, asked, You mean the sage? The vampire god replied, older than the sage, the first of the elders. He then named this ancient and powerful entity Azrael, the progenitor of shadows. Elder stood in awe at the possibility of Azrael's return, the very thought of such a formidable ally invigorating his spirit. If Azrael could be persuaded to join their cause, the balance of power could shift dramatically in their favor. As the vampire god vanished as mysteriously as he had appeared, Elder and his elders were left to ponder the implications. The promise of Azrael's involvement not only provided a glimmer of hope, but also a deep sense of the challenges that lay ahead. They knew that the path forward would be fraught with peril, but with potential aid from such a legendary figure, they might just stand a chance against the rising undead force led by Necros. Divine conspiracies. In the deep woods, where nature's heart beat strongest, the essence of the lichen god mingled with the earth and the trees, sensing the delicate fabric of the world being stretched and torn. As the most powerful of all supernatural gods, with the closest connection to the natural world, it felt a profound disturbance in the balance that had governed the planet for millennia. This divine being, woven into the very essence of nature, felt an overwhelming concern for the future of the world, a world teetering on the brink of irreversible destruction. The lichen god, with its immense power, could sense the pull of forces darker and more desperate than any it had encountered before. It was a force that was not merely reacting to the chaos, but seemed to be driving it, manipulating the gods and their supernatural followers into accelerating the collapse of the global balance. As the lichen god searched for answers among the whispers of the wind and the murmurs of the earth, it detected an interference, a deliberate manipulation that was almost imperceptible. Something, or someone, was forcing the gods to intervene in ways that they normally would avoid, pushing the balance ever closer to the brink of destruction. Why would such a force seek the unraveling of the world? What ends could possibly justify such catastrophic means? And who, or what, could possess the power and knowledge to influence the gods themselves? These questions hung heavily in the air, unanswered but increasingly urgent. The woods themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the next move in this high-stakes game of divine chess. As the lichen god contemplated its next actions, far from being resigned to despair, it prepared to rally the other supernatural entities. It knew that if they could uncover the puppeteer behind this dangerous manipulation, they might stand a chance to restore balance and prevent the impending doom. Stay tuned for the penultimate episode of Crimson Dawn Season 2, Part 9, where the mysteries deepen and the fate of the world hangs in the balance. Who is manipulating the supernatural forces, and can they be stopped before it's too late? The answers to these questions promise to reshape the future of the world as we know it. Origins of a genius. Before the world knew of werewolves and the undead, before the apocalypse tore through the fabric of society, Simon Winter was already shaping the future with his groundbreaking work. A pioneer in the field of electromagnetic brain science, a discipline he himself had founded. Winter's intellect was unparalleled, his innovations far beyond the norm. In the quiet sanctum of his private laboratory, Winter's research into Alzheimer's disease was both personal and profound. His superior knowledge in the manipulation of electromagnetic fields around the brain had led to the development of revolutionary therapies and diagnostic tools. His work, often described as decades ahead of his peers, focused on the neurodegenerative processes that robbed so many of their memories and identities. But it was at home where the true depth of Winter's motivations lay bare. Caring for his wife, whom he affectionately called Mara, Winter found his greatest challenge and deepest inspiration. Mara, once vibrant and full of life, now struggled with the onset of early Alzheimer's disease. Each day, he watched as the woman he loved slipped further away from him, her moments of clarity fading like stars at dawn. "I will soon be able to stop this, my love," Winter said softly to Mara as he adjusted a delicate array of sensors around her head. He had been refining a new process, initially tested on himself, to clear neural blockages and enhance cognitive function. "I've used a new process on myself to clear away any blocks in my own brain. It has given me more clarity into how the brain works. Each and every day, I seem to clear out the parts that are useless and unlock more and more of my potential. I can see how to cure you." Mara looked up at him, her eyes clouded with confusion. At first, she did not recognize the man who had been her partner for decades, but as the moments passed, a flicker of recognition sparked in her gaze. "Simon," she whispered, a smile slowly forming on her lips. Winter hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of hope. His experiments had not only expanded his cognitive abilities, but had begun to offer a glimpse of a potential cure for his wife. Yet, what Winter did not yet fully understand was how these enhancements to his own brain would later influence his actions and decisions when the world fell into chaos. The same technologies and techniques developed to heal were soon to be repurposed for survival in a world dominated by supernatural threats. As Winter continued his work, the lines between his past research and the future apocalypse began to blur. The tools and knowledge crafted for medical breakthroughs would soon become instrumental in navigating and shaping a new world order, where the boundaries of science and supernatural forces were inexorably intertwined. The unfolding genius. In the depths of his private laboratory, Simon Winter was engrossed in a series of self-experiments that extended far beyond the conventional boundaries of medical science. His therapy, a complex electromagnetic treatment designed to unlock neural pathways and enhance cognitive function, was not only intended to save his beloved Mara, but also aimed to revolutionize the treatment of Alzheimer's disease for the world. Winter's therapy was predicated on the theory that the human brain, typically utilizing a fraction of its potential, could be stimulated to operate at significantly higher capacities. Conventional wisdom and scientific consensus suggested that humans only tap into about 10% of their brain's potential capabilities. This figure, often debated in academic circles, wasn't about the physical percentage of the brain used, but rather its functional capacity in everyday tasks and thinking processes. As Winter applied his breakthrough electromagnetic techniques to himself, he began experiencing a profound expansion of his cognitive abilities. The treatment was unlocking parts of his brain that had lain dormant, pushing his brain's usage to an unprecedented 30%. With this increase, Winter's perception and understanding of biological systems deepened extraordinarily. At a 30% brain capacity, Winter's cognitive enhancements manifested in several profound ways: enhanced memory and recall. His ability to store and retrieve information became almost limitless. He could recall intricate details from decades past with ease, aiding his research and experimental designs. Accelerated problem solving. Winter found that he could solve complex scientific problems that had previously eluded him. His ability to model and predict biological pathways accelerated, making his work on Alzheimer's more promising than ever. Heightened perception. Winter began to notice details in his environment that he had previously overlooked. This heightened sensory awareness allowed him to make connections between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Advanced learning ability. He could absorb new information at an astonishing rate, learn in languages, understand in advanced texts, and synthesize in new concepts quickly. Increased creativity and innovation. With more of his brain active, Winter found himself thinking outside conventional scientific paradigms, leading to innovative approaches that would normally be dismissed or unconsidered. However, these enhancements came with unintended consequences. Winter's increased brain function also altered his emotional processing and empathy. He became more detached, seeing problems and solutions in a purely logical way, which affected his interactions and emotional connections with others, including Mara. As he pushed the boundaries of human cognitive abilities, Winter did not fully grasp the transformation he was undergoing. His singular focus on curing Alzheimer's obscured the broader changes in his psyche and personality. This increased brain capacity was reshaping him into something beyond the ordinary, setting the stage for the pivotal role he would play as the world around him descended into chaos with the emergence of supernatural forces. Winter's journey into the expanded capabilities of the human mind was just beginning, and the consequences of his unprecedented cognitive enhancement were yet to unfold fully, leading him into realms of science and supernatural interactions that were previously the domain of fiction. The cataclysm and the cure. As the world descended into chaos with the emergence of werewolves and the undead, Simon Winter remained sequestered in his laboratory, obsessively focused on curing his wife Mara from the cruel clutches of Alzheimer's. His breakthrough was monumental, a device capable of rejuvenating the brain by clearing blockages and optimizing neural pathways. The potential to restore Mara's memory was within reach, and Winter's excitement was palpable. However, fate intervened in a most disruptive way. Just as he was about to finalize his treatment, government agents stormed his laboratory. The apocalypse had forced the government's hand. They needed Winter's unmatched intellect for a different purpose. With werewolves and the undead overrunning cities, they compelled him to develop a weapon against these supernatural threats. Relocating Winter and his ailing wife to a high-security underground bunker, the government dictated the terms of his research. In this new, stark environment, Winter reassured Mara, his voice a blend of warmth and mechanical precision. "I will cure you, Mara. The plans are complete in my mind. This new base is a setback, but we will overcome it." Mara, her cognition waning under the dual pressures of her disease and the upheaval around them, recognized him less each day. Winter's new creation, an electromagnetic device designed to revitalize the brain's functionality, was nearly operational. Alone in their quarters, he initiated the treatment on Mara. As the device hummed to life, Mara's eyes began to clear, recognition flickering within them. "Simon, where are we?" she murmured, a trace of her former self surfacing amidst the confusion. "Be still, my dear," Winter replied, his voice steady but laden with urgency. "This last part is delicate. One wrong move and—" At that moment, the base shuddered under the impact of an external assault, likely an attack by the undead or rogue factions, and the power flickered out. In the engulfing darkness, Winter's anguished cry echoed, "No!" When the emergency lights flickered back on, the tragic sight that greeted him was Mara, motionless on the bed, the treatment incomplete, her life seemingly extinguished. Winter's response was chilling in its detachment, his emotions suppressed by his heightened cognitive state. He immediately returned to his workbench. "The problem of power must be solved," he muttered to himself, his brain now functioning more as a supercomputer than a human mind. In the solitude of the bunker, with his wife's lifeless body nearby, Winter's genius twisted into something new, a tool not just for saving lives, but potentially for ending the supernatural menace that ravaged the world. His emotions buried deep beneath layers of logic and enhanced cognitive processes, Winter began to devise a plan that would not only run his medical devices independently of external power sources, but also turn the tide of the supernatural apocalypse, escape and resurrection. Winter's days and nights blurred together as he tirelessly worked on what the government agents demanded, a weapon to turn the tide against the supernatural entities that now roamed the world. Yet, for Winter, this weapon was inseparable from his original mission to cure Alzheimer's. His brain capacity, constantly evolving and expanding due to his self-administered treatments, enabled him to see connections and solutions that remained out of reach for ordinary minds. As Winter finalized his designs, the realization dawned on him that his most powerful creation was not something he could physically construct. It was his mind itself. The government, driven by desperation and fear, failed to see that their greatest weapon was the genius they sought to control. Winter, ever the strategist, refused to hand over his work, understanding all too well that the government's intentions were self-serving at best. When the agents, frustrated and anxious for progress, decided to lock Winter away in a high-security cell within the bunker, they underestimated his capabilities. The facility, already strained under constant threats of raids and assaults by various factions, soon fell victim to a major incursion. Amidst the chaos, Winter made his calculated escape, leaving behind the intricate plans for the so-called weapon. He knew that to anyone else, deciphering his work would be akin to an ant contemplating quantum mechanics, utterly impossible without his level of cognitive function. Unbeknownst to the agents and the raiders, Winter also took something priceless with him, the body of his beloved Mara. In a new hidden location, he painstakingly rebuilt his laboratory, determined to continue his work. With his profound knowledge of cryonics, he preserved Mara's body in a state of suspended animation. "Death is not the end," he whispered to her serene, ice-enshrouded form. "But to bring you back, I will need a certain power, a power that transcends what even I have achieved so far." In the solitude of his new sanctuary, Winter set about the next phase of his grand plan. He needed to harness or develop a power that could defy the natural order, a power potent enough to resurrect the dead. His thoughts often drifted to the supernatural forces he had learned about, wondering if perhaps the secrets to such power lay with the beings that now dominated the apocalyptic landscape. As Winter worked by the dim light of his lab, his mind raced with possibilities. Each theory and hypothesis built upon the next, his incredible brain capacity weaving together strands of science, a supernatural law, and his own groundbreaking discoveries. Somewhere within this complex tapestry of knowledge lay the key to Mara's return, and perhaps to altering the course of the supernatural apocalypse itself. Transformation of Winter. As Winter delved deeper into the arcane and obscure texts of supernatural lore, his brain, already supercharged by his self-administered treatments, absorbed information at a breathtaking pace. His capacity for learning and comprehension had surpassed any known benchmarks, allowing him to grasp the complex and often contradictory nature of supernatural laws that governed the creatures of the night and the undead that walked the earth. However, with every piece of ancient knowledge uncovered and every supernatural phenomenon understood, Winter's frustration grew. The power he sought to emulate, the power to resurrect Mara and possibly alter the very fabric of reality, seemed tantalizingly out of reach. His mind raced through calculations and theories, but the stark realization dawned on him. There was no known scientific or magical means to replicate such formidable powers. In a moment of profound introspection, Winter stood in front of a mirror in his secluded laboratory. The reflection that stared back at him was both familiar and alien. The face of Simon Winter, the renowned scientist, passionate about curing Alzheimer's, seemed like a mask hiding the extraordinary entity he had become. The brain behind that face had evolved so far beyond human norms that it was no longer fitting to associate it with his past identity. Speaking to his reflection, his voice carried a mixture of resolve and mourning. This face will not be seen again, only by Mara, when she again lives. Until that time, Simon Winter is dead. Now only Winter lives. This declaration marked the shedding of his old identity and the full embrace of his new persona, driven not by human emotion, but by a cold, calculating intelligence aimed at a singular goal. In the following days, Winter set to work on crafting a physical representation of his transformation. He constructed a mask made from a polished chrome metal, meticulously designed to fit his features. The mask was not just a shield to hide his identity, but a symbol of his new self, reflective, impenetrable, and enigmatic. Whenever Winter looked at his own reflection, he would see the infinite, a constant reminder of his boundless intellect, and the eternal quest that now defined his existence. This chrome mask became Winter's new face to the world, one that no longer bore the vulnerabilities of Simon Winter, but projected the formidable presence of Winter, the being who transcended human frailties and peered into the abyss of supernatural powers. With this new identity, Winter was ready to step out from the shadows of his hidden laboratory and interact with the chaotic world outside, a world where supernatural forces clashed in an ever-escalating battle for dominance. Winter's journey had taken him far beyond the realms of science into something much darker and more profound. Field test. Winter, now donning his reflective, chrome mask and equipped with his advanced weapon, a fusion of science and his ever-evolving mind, decided it was time to test the limits of his new capabilities. The weapon was not just an apparatus, it was an extension of his intellect, controlled partially by his thoughts and the intricate mechanisms he had devised. Venturing into the ruins of what once was a bustling area, Winter encountered a group of undead shuffling aimlessly. With a mere gesture of his hand, a wave of energy pulsed from his device, and the creatures collapsed onto the ground, lifeless. Too brutal, he muttered to himself, dissatisfied with the lack of finesse. His goal wasn't just destruction, but control. Continuing his journey, Winter came upon another group of undead. This time, he adjusted his approach, focusing his mind and weapon to manipulate rather than obliterate. With concentrated effort, he commanded them to halt. The undead stopped in their tracks, frozen in time as if caught in an invisible snare. At any moment, I can end them, he observed, pleased with the precise control. But let's see how it works on the werewolves. Winter's quest led him next to a small pack of lichen. Hidden under the cover of dense foliage, he targeted the group, tuning his device to their unique brain patterns. With his unmatched skill in electromagnetic manipulation, he attempted to seize control. The werewolves halted, frozen momentarily by Winter's intervention. Easy, he whispered with a hint of arrogance. However, as he delved deeper, trying to infiltrate their minds more intrusively, he encountered an unexpected resistance, a barrier that blocked his access to the deeper, cognitive layers of the lichen. Winter's smile broadened behind his mask. "Got you," he said quietly, intrigued and challenged by this new obstacle. Later that day, back in the sanctity of his laboratory, Winter sat deep in thought. "It's there, but I cannot access it fully. I need a direct connection," he spoke aloud, his words echoing off the cold, hard walls of his secluded workspace. This realization marked a pivotal moment in his research. The barriers he faced with the lichen suggested a level of complexity and protection in their neural architecture that was unlike anything he had encountered in humans or other undead. Winter knew that overcoming this hurdle could unlock even greater potential in his quest for control, and perhaps even for resurrecting Mara. His mind raced with possibilities: neural interfaces, direct neural manipulation, advanced biotechnological integration. Each idea flowed into the next, his thoughts a torrent of innovation, spurred on by the challenge. As he prepared for the next phase of his experiments, Winter was not just a scientist or a widower driven by grief. He had become a force of nature himself, pushing the boundaries of what was possible in a world governed by supernatural laws and human desperation. In the dim glow of his laboratory, Winter gazed at Mara's preserved form, her serene face encased in the cryonic chamber that held the promise of their reunion. He spoke to her as if she could hear him, his voice a soft murmur filled with resolve and a hint of impatience. "Soon, Mara. Very soon. I see them now. The players in this grand game of power, but there are moves yet to be made before I can act decisively. First, I must ensure the humans survive a while longer. They are key to tipping the balance. Only then can I access the power I need to bring you back. Work it shall, my dear." Winter's plan was not just about revival or power. It was about restoring a balance that had been severely disrupted by the forces of supernatural entities vying for dominance. His understanding of these forces had grown immensely, and he knew that manipulating these dynamics was essential for achieving his ultimate goal. Fast forward to present times, Winter stood atop a desolate building, overlooking a ravaged cityscape. Below, a group of undead marched, their eyes blazing with an unnatural fire, a stark reminder of the chaotic world that now existed. Winter watched them intently, his chrome mask reflecting the eerie glow of their eyes. "The time is near," he whispered to himself, a slight edge of excitement in his voice. "One more push." Winter's mind was a whirlwind of strategy and anticipation. He needed to catalyze a final event that would shift the power dynamics dramatically in his favor. This push involved leveraging the ongoing conflict between the supernatural factions to create a vacuum of power, one that he could then fill using his advanced technologies and newfound abilities. Back in his lab, Winter returned to his array of monitors and devices, each one displaying data and simulations of possible outcomes. His fingers danced across touchscreens, adjusting parameters and running predictive models. With each simulation, he edged closer to the perfect scenario that would enable him to intervene decisively. As Winter orchestrated his plans from the shadows, the world outside continued its descent into chaos. Supernatural creatures battled in the streets, unaware of the puppet master who was slowly taking control of their fates. Winter knew that each skirmish, each conflict, brought him closer to his goal. With Mara always in his thoughts, Winter's actions were calculated and precise. He was no longer just a scientist or a grieving husband. He was a player in a much larger game, a game that spanned the realms of the living, the dead, and those in between. As he prepared for the final act of his grand strategy, Winter remained confident that he would emerge victorious, not just for his sake, but for Mara's as well. The Edge of Revelation, coming soon in the gripping finale of Crimson Dawn Season 2. As the intricate web of Winter's plans unfolds, the very fabric of supernatural power is tested. The gods, ancient and powerful, find themselves at a crossroads, influenced by Winter's unprecedented machinations. Is Winter truly capable of swaying the divine balance that has governed the cosmos for eons? Or will his ambitious schemes provoke a celestial backlash that could unravel the threads of existence itself? Humans, long seen as mere pawns in the eternal games played by gods and monsters, may hold a key unforeseen by the supernatural entities that seek to use them. As the plans of a genius forged in tragedy and brilliance come to light, The true nature of humanity's role in this cosmic drama will be revealed. Are they merely victims of a greater game, or do they possess the potential to tip the scales in a battle for their own destiny? Moreover, the mysterious rescue of the Alpha by Winter raises profound questions. Was this act merely a piece of a larger puzzle, a move calculated for its effects on the supernatural hierarchy? Or was there a glimpse of the old Simon Winter, motivated by empathy and a sense of justice, beneath the strategic surface of his actions? As the finale of Crimson Dawn Season 2 approaches, these questions loom large, promising answers filled with power, betrayal, and the potential for redemption. Watch as the narrative threads, woven through intense battles, dark alliances, and the quest for power, converge in a climax that will define the future of every creature, mortal and divine, in this haunted world. Stay tuned for the ultimate showdown, where the fate of gods, humans, and the resurrected forces of darkness will collide. Will Winter's ultimate plan succeed, or will it unleash consequences beyond his control? Find out in the explosive conclusion of Crimson Dawn. The Awakening of Azrael. In the depths of a forgotten forest, shrouded by the mists of time and guarded by the dense canopy above, a sacred site lay hidden. This ancient place, pulsing with the dark energies of centuries, was where Eldur and his assembly of elders gathered under the cloak of night. The air was thick with anticipation as they chanted in the ancient tongue of the night, voices melding into a haunting melody that resonated with the very essence of darkness. Influenced by the vampire god and granted a portion of his formidable power, the elders performed a ritual of resurrection. Their chants grew in intensity, calling upon the mighty Azrael, the first of the elders who had been dead for centuries. As their voices rose to a crescendo, the very fabric of reality began to tremble, small fissures cracking the ground around the sacred site. The power required to summon such a being was immense, and with each word uttered, the balance of the world teetered dangerously towards the brink. Suddenly, with a thunderous roar that echoed through the forest, a portal of dark energy erupted from the ground. From this swirling vortex of shadows, a giant winged beast emerged, its presence so overwhelming that the air around it seemed to warp and weep. Azrael, the ancient harbinger of destruction, unfurled his colossal wings, casting an eclipse over the land. His eyes, burning with an unholy fire, surveyed his summoners. "You have done well to bring me back. I hunger for destruction." Azrael boomed, his voice resonating with the power of the abyss. The elders, despite their own formidable powers, bowed low before him, recognizing the supremacy of the creature they had awakened. However, unbeknownst to them, the act of summoning Azrael had pushed the world's delicate balance to a critical point. A Across the globe, at the Undead metropolis, the necromancer, once known as Stephen Lestat, was busy administering his genetically engineered concoctions to the undead. Enhanced far beyond their natural capabilities, these undead beings glowed with a new ferocity, the fire in their eyes a testament to their burgeoning power. "This time, we will not fail," Lestat declared, watching with satisfaction as his creations tested their newfound strengths. Yet, as the undead evolved, pushing the limits of their abilities, the fabric of reality grew thinner, small cracks appearing, threatening to fracture entirely. Deep in the woods, the Lichen God felt the shift in the world's balance. Drawing energy from nature itself, he sent a surge of power to his Lichen followers, energizing them for the struggles ahead. Each pulse of power he sent further strained the already taut balance. The world was on a precipice, with the supernatural forces inadvertently driving it towards an abyss. As these titans of the night drew on increasingly dangerous levels of power, the question loomed: could the world survive the cataclysm they were caught in? Or would their actions unravel the very threads holding reality together? The stage was set for a confrontation of epic proportions, where the fates of gods, monsters, and humans would intertwine in the final chapter of the Crimson Dawn saga. The brink of cataclysm. At Fort Haven and the human camp, an ominous tension hung in the air. Both Alex and Elena at the camp, and Captain Harris and Commander Lewis at Fort Haven, felt a tangible crackle in the atmosphere, a disturbing sign that the fabric of reality itself was being stretched dangerously thin. The uneasy feeling was pervasive, stirring deep concerns about the stability of the world itself. "This feels like the end," Captain Harris murmured, his voice heavy with worry as he observed the sky darken ominously. Commander Lewis nodded in agreement, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where strange lights flickered unnaturally. "If we survive this, it'll be nothing short of a miracle," he added, reflecting the despair and resignation that had begun to take hold among the humans. Meanwhile, at a clandestine location, Elder and his assembly of elders, now allied with the formidable Azrael, plotted their course of action. The presence of Azrael had galvanized the elders, infusing them with a dark resolve. As they strategized, it was agreed that the undead, especially those under the influence of Necros and enhanced by the necromancer's genetic manipulations, posed the greatest immediate threat. Azrael, massive and imposing, his voice echoing like thunder, declared indifferently, "I do not care who we destroy first, but I yearn for destruction. Let it be so." His words were not just a statement, but a decree, setting the path for what was to come. With a newfound vicious intent, the elders, led by the towering Azrael, advanced toward the metropolis, a sprawling city that had become a stronghold for the necromancer and his nightmarish army. The necromancer, ever vigilant and empowered by the dark blessings of Necros, had created an army of abominations, beings that transcended the limitations of both the living and the dead, imbued with horrific enhancements that made them nearly invincible. Sensing the impending threat of the elders, Necros cast his vast, shadowy influence across the realms, alerting his first in command, the necromancer, a master of dark arts and biological terror, readied his formidable forces. His creations, monstrous in form and terrifying in power, stood at the ready, a grotesque testament to the perversion of life and death. As the elders approached the city, the ground beneath them trembled, not just from their formidable march, but from the very clash of titanic forces preparing to collide. The air was thick with the power of ancient magic and the stench of unnatural creation. Back at the human encampments, the leaders prepared for the worst. The skies seemed to mirror their dread, with dark clouds swirling ominously above. The humans, though far removed from the direct conflict, understood that the outcome of this battle could very well determine the fate of all life on Earth. The stage was set, the players were ready, and as the elders neared the metropolis, the world held its breath, waiting for the cataclysm that seemed inevitable. The confrontation between these colossal forces was not just a battle for supremacy, but a fight for the very soul of the planet. The clash of titans. The air was thick with the stench of decay and the sharp tang of fresh blood as Azrael, summoned by Elder and the Elders, led a brutal assault on the undead metropolis. Towering over the battlefield, Azrael's monstrous form crushed the undead beneath his colossal feet, his every movement causing the earth itself to tremble. The Elders, shrouded in shadows, wielded newly forged weapons of silver, slicing through their enemies with unnatural speed and ferocity. The scene was one of utter chaos and destruction, fitting the dark intentions of those who had called upon such a fearsome ally. However, the undead were not easily vanquished. Enhanced by the necromancer's sinister gene therapy and infused with the wrathful spirit of Necros, the undead god, they retaliated with a horrifying force. Some, more formidable than the rest, even managed to wound the mighty Azrael. Amidst the melee, 4 of Elder's elders fell, their ancient blood soaking into the ravaged earth, while hundreds of undead lay dismantled around them. Seeing the tide of battle turn, Elder called for a strategic retreat. "Azrael, we need to regroup," he shouted over the cacophony of clashing metal and unearthly roars, but Azrael, consumed by his destructive nature, ignored Elder's command. The giant continued his rampage, leaving destruction in his wake as he plowed through the undead ranks. It was then that the earth itself seemed to pulse and split as Necros himself appeared. His presence was a palpable force, chilling the very air. With a mere gesture, he brought the mighty Azrael to his knees. The behemoth fell, his body dissolving into shadows as he died, a victim of the godly powers wielded by Necros. "This is how you wish to play?" Necros boomed, his voice echoing like thunder, challenging the very gods. With a dramatic sweep of his arms, he began to resurrect the fallen undead, their bodies piecing together in a grotesque semblance of life. The necromancer watched, a sly grin spreading across his face, delighted by the display of such formidable power. The balance of supernatural forces teetered dangerously as more and more powers not meant for this earth were summoned and manipulated. Elder, in desperate communication with the vampire god, pleaded for intervention. Their god interfered, killing Azrael. "He mocks you, my lord, by cheating and using powers unfair in this battle," he argued, his voice a mixture of fury and fear. In response to Elder's entreaties, the vampire god, risking the wrath of other celestial entities and the delicate balance of life and death, resummoned Azrael and the fallen elders. The skies darkened ominously, reality itself seeming to crack and strain under the weight of these divine machinations. Fissures appeared in the fabric of existence, the balance pushed ever closer to the brink of destruction. Meanwhile, far from the battlefield, Simon Winter looked up at the turbulent skies from the solitude of his hidden bunker. The scientist, his face etched with concern and determination, muttered to his frozen wife, "It's coming, Mara." His voice was a whisper of foreboding, hinting at the storm of supernatural forces gathering above and the role he would soon play in the impending chaos. Sanctuary and Siege. In the celestial realms, Lisanor, the god of the Lycans, felt the tremors that threatened the very fabric of reality. The balance of the world teetered on the brink as supernatural forces clashed with unrestrained ferocity. Sensing an imminent threat against the Alpha and the remaining members of his pack, Lisanor faced a dire choice. The fall of the Lycans could push the world beyond redemption, tipping the scales towards an irrevocable rift in reality. However, any excessive divine intervention risked accelerating this catastrophic fracture. With a heavy heart and a wisdom born of ages, Lysanor decided on a compromise. Harnessing his considerable powers, he crafted a sanctuary, a hidden dimension parallel to the earthly realm. Here, his lichens could roam free, their essence still part of the world, yet their bodies shielded in a realm removed from direct conflict. This act, while protective, added yet another strain to the already stretched seams of reality. Meanwhile, the ground of the undead metropolis trembled with the march of an army. The necromancer, emboldened and enraged by the Elder's assault, led his grotesque legion, abominations twisted by biogene therapy concoctions, towards the Elder's stronghold. Their number seemed limitless, their forms horrifying as they advanced with relentless determination. Back at Fort Haven, the situation grew increasingly dire. The ground shook intermittently, and the sky was a tapestry of dark clouds and random bursts of light, signaling the fracturing of reality itself. Amidst this chaos, Captain Harris stood before the gathered inhabitants, his figure a pillar of resolve against the backdrop of despair. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Harris began, his voice firm and carrying over the murmurs of anxious civilians, "these are indeed the darkest hours we have ever faced, but it is in darkness that the faintest light shines the brightest. We must hold on to that light. Hope. We must stand together, united not just by our struggle, but by our resolve to endure, to prevail. As long as we breathe, as long as we stand, we fight, not just for survival, but for the future, a future where hope endures undimmed." Across the wasteland, in another human camp, Elena and Alex witnessed the same terrifying phenomena in the sky. Gathering their people, they echoed Captain Harris's sentiments, instilling a renewed vigor to withstand the apocalyptic forces at their doorsteps. "Look up, not with fear, but with defiance." Elena addressed her camp, her voice resolute. "The skies may threaten, but our spirits must soar above. We are more than survivors. We are the bearers of hope. Let that hope bind us, guide us, and lead us through these trials." Alex added, "In unity there is strength. Remember, we've overcome before, and we'll do it again. Stand together, support each other, and keep the flame of hope alive." As both leaders spoke, their words not only fortified the resolve of their people, but also served as a reminder of the human spirit's indomitable will. Even as reality itself seemed on the brink of collapse, the determination to fight, to hope, and to endure persisted, shining as a beacon in the encroaching darkness. The precipice of chaos. The battlefield was set, a stark landscape where the inevitability of violence was palpable. Elder, leader of the Elders, stood resolute, his expression one of grim determination as he surveyed the approaching horde. Beside him, the resurrected Azrael towered like a colossus, his form casting long shadows over the land. "As long as they don't cheat again, we can stop them," Elder muttered, his voice barely a whisper against the howling winds. From a vantage point, perched high above the impending carnage, Simon Winter watched intently. His enhanced intellect processed every possible outcome, his mind a whirlwind of calculations and strategies. "It's almost ready," he whispered to himself, his eyes never leaving the spectacle below. His anticipation was not for victory or defeat in the battle itself, but for the chaotic opportunities it might present. As the two forces collided, the air was filled with the sounds of war, metal clashing, unearthly roars, and the screams of the fallen. Azrael, wielding powers not of this earth, decimated the ranks of the undead with sweeping blows that sent bodies flying like ragdolls. Yet, despite his might, the sheer number of the undead overwhelmed the elders. One by one they fell, their ancient blood soaking the battlefield, until only Elder and Serana were left, forced to make a hasty retreat. In the chaos, huge abominations crafted by the necromancer's dark sciences lunged at Azrael. These creatures, grotesque parodies of life, struck with fury, managing to wound the giant before being obliterated by his raw, destructive power. Frustrated and desperate, the necromancer called out to Necros, god of the undead. "This Azrael is too powerful, resurrected and wielding godly powers. How are we supposed to fight such a thing? Necros, god of the undead, hear the call of your servants." In response, the earth itself seemed to groan in protest as Necros emerged once more. Drawing on the profound energies of death itself, he smote Azrael, who fell once again, his form dispersing into shadows that faded into the wind. The rifts in reality grew larger, and the earth shook violently. Fear permeated everything, living and dead, man and god alike, as the potential for catastrophic collapse became more apparent. All around, the creatures of the earth, the spirits of the air, and the souls of the departed sensed the disruption. Panic and terror spread like wildfire, the very fabric of existence seeming to fray at the edges. Amidst this chaos, only Simon Winter remained unfazed, his expression one of cold calculation. From his elevated position, he observed the growing disturbances in reality, knowing that each event brought him closer to his ultimate goal. "One more should do it," he muttered, his voice tinged with a mix of anticipation and foreboding. In his mind's eye, he envisioned the final act of his grand plan, a plan that could either save or doom everything he held dear. The final sundering. As the dust settled from the previous clashes, the necromancer, driven by a vengeful fury, marshaled his remaining forces toward the Elder's stronghold. The undead, once fallen and now reanimated by the dark will of Necros, swelled the ranks with relentless resolve. The time had come to end the Elders once and for all. At the Elder's stronghold, Elder, desperate and cornered, implored the vampire god for further assistance. "We must not lose this war," he pleaded, his voice echoing through the supernatural channels, convinced by Elder's urgency and unwilling to cede victory to Necros. The vampire god consented to resurrect Azrael once more, despite the evident dangers to the fabric of reality. As the god summoned Azrael back into existence, a palpable tension gripped the cosmos. The air vibrated with the power of the gods clashing, their divine interventions tearing at the seams of reality. Meanwhile, Simon Winter, ever the observer and manipulator, stood calmly amidst the chaos. In a symbolic gesture that seemed almost mundane yet ominously significant, he dropped a single piece of straw onto the ground, a proverbial final straw to break the camel's back. The impact was instantaneous and catastrophic. The cracks in reality, already strained beyond repair, split wide open. The earth shuddered with violence that seemed to echo the anger of the gods themselves. In mere moments, the world shattered, breaking apart like fragile glass struck by the hammer of inevitability. As reality collapsed, everything ceased to exist. The world that once teemed with life, conflict, and the vibrant essence of existence was no more. In its place, there was only void, a chilling, empty space devoid of matter, energy, and the very essence of life itself. This emptiness was not just a physical absence, but a profound emptiness that permeated the remnants of where a world once was. It was an emptiness that extended beyond the absence of life forms. It was the absence of possibility, of futures never to be realized, of histories forever silenced. The supernatural and the mundane, the living and the dead, all distinctions became irrelevant as they were all uniformly erased from existence. In this void, no light shone, no shadows cast. The gods, with their immense powers, had pushed the world past its breaking point, and in doing so, obliterated everything. What remained was a silence as deep as it was eternal, a testament to the destructive consequences of power wielded without foresight or restraint. The remnants of reality hung suspended in nothingness, a stark reminder of what once was, a world vibrant with life, now just a memory in the void of what might have been. The divine accord in the remnants of a shattered existence within the folds of an alternate reality. Lysanor, the Lycan god, sensed the cataclysmic shift. He felt the extinguishing of life and death, the cries of world's occupants, and then a haunting silence that pervaded the universe. Harnessing his divine power, he summoned both Necros and the vampire god to this liminal space. They materialized, their forms tense with the weight of recent events. Lysanor spoke first, his voice solemn and resonant. The constant strain of our intervention has obliterated the reality we once influenced, he declared, his gaze fixed on his fellow deities. Our actions, driven by pride and power, have led to the extinction of that world and all its life. Necros and the vampire god reacted with immediate defensiveness, each pointing fingers at the other. Your reckless ambitions fueled this catastrophe, Necros accused, his voice cold as the grave. You dared to challenge my authority repeatedly, igniting this conflict, countered the vampire god, his eyes blazing with indignation. Lysanor raised a hand to silence them. I foresaw the potential for such destruction and have contemplated a solution. However, it requires a sacrifice none of us may be prepared to make. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. To restore the world, one god must amass the combined power of all three. The other two must fall, relinquishing their essence and authority. The vampire god scoffed, arrogance lining his features. Naturally, it should be me. I am the strongest and most powerful. You? Necros sneered. Your minions needed my power to achieve any significant victory. It's laughable to think you could restore the world alone. Lysanor interrupted their bickering. There is a way to resolve this. We will create a realm where each of us will begin with a small number of our subjects, proportionate to our strengths. We will also pool random human survivors from just before the collapse to establish communities. These humans will serve as resources for our followers to bolster their ranks. He continued, outlining the plan. When strong enough, our factions will engage in battle. The victor's flock will determine who among us will be the one god to restore the planet. We will be trapped in this plane of existence, forbidden to interfere directly. Should any of us break this rule, that faction will lose instantly. After some initial arguing and reluctance, the necessity of the situation and the potential to regain their powers and influence led the three gods to an uneasy agreement. Each god recognized the stakes. They were not only fighting for supremacy, but for the chance to redefine their legacy and perhaps correct the arrogance that had led them to this point. Thus, with a combination of mutual distrust and a shared desire to undo the damage they had caused, they initiated the creation of this new realm, a battleground for deities, set apart from the realm of mortals yet deeply intertwined with the fate of countless souls. This agreement marked not only a new beginning, but also an acknowledgement of their collective responsibility for the worlds under their influence. The game of gods. With a thunderous crash that echoed through the void left by the shattered reality, a new realm sprang into existence. The three gods, pooling their residual powers, crafted a world designed as a grand arena for the ultimate test of supremacy. As their powers waned to mere embers from the exertion, an impenetrable barrier formed around them, separating their sanctuaries from the rest of this newly forged world. This barrier was designed to prevent any direct interference from the gods, and served as sanctuary for them to slowly regenerate their strength. In this constructed realm, distance and direction held new meanings. To the south, the Elders established their domain. Elder, alongside Serana and 20 of their most formidable kin, commanded a dark, imposing castle that rose from the mist-shrouded lands like a spectre. Their stronghold was a bastion of ancient power and dark majesty, reflecting the grave nature of the undead essence. To the north lay the domain of the Undead, a fortified city of death that teemed with thousands of warriors. The Necromancer, with his profound mastery of death and decay, ruled over this city. Its walls, built from the bones of the fallen and cemented with the ash of decay, stood as a grim reminder of the Necromancer's power and the relentless nature of his army. In the east, the Lycans took to the primeval forests, where the new Alpha and a pack of 9 formidable Lycans constructed a sprawling treetop complex. Their stronghold, interwoven among the towering trees, was both a fortress and a testament to their deep connection with nature. The Lycans, fierce and proud, prepared to defend their territory with tooth and claw. To the west, a large human stronghold emerged, bustling with activity and life. This was the ultimate prize for the factions, a repository of not just human life, but of potential power. The humans, unknowing but essential players in this divine game, continued their existence, bolstered by small laboratories, engineering posts, and farms scattered throughout their stronghold and various outposts. These installations ensured that the human population could thrive, unwittingly serving the greater game set by the gods. Scattered between these strongholds, smaller outposts and towns populated by humans dotted the landscape, serving as both strategic points and stock for the supernatural factions. Each faction viewed these human enclaves both as a resource and a battleground, pivotal to their strategy for dominance. The stage was set, the players positioned, and the stakes declared. Only one deity would emerge with the power to restore reality, to mend the fabric torn by their collective hubris. This realm, born of divine compromise and desperation, was now the arena where the future of existence itself would be decided. The gods watched, their omnipotence paused, as their creations and champions moved towards an inevitable clash that would determine the very nature of their existence, and perhaps the fate of all reality. The calculations of winter. In the newly forged realm, the cycles of day and night seemed indifferent to the turmoil that had birthed them. In a small outpost to the east, closest to the territories of the Lycan, humans went about their daily lives with a simplicity that belied the complex orchestrations around them. Here, farming, trading, and community growth continued as if woven from the fabric of an ordinary world. Their memories of past cataclysms had faded into a hazy blur, a testament to the resilience, or perhaps the manipulation, of human consciousness. Among them walked a man with a deliberate stride, his presence slightly out of sync with the rustic charm of his surroundings. He entered the engineer's workshop, a hub of roll-clattering tools and the hum of innovation, where the community's brightest minds forged equipment essential for their survival and growth. The engineers, absorbed in their tasks, nodded as he approached, recognizing his intent, if not fully understanding the depth of his purpose. After spending considerable time among the schematics and metalworks, the man emerged. His appearance had transformed. Now he wore a chrome mask, sleek and reflective, hiding his features, but not his resolve. This mask, crafted with his own hands, was a shield, and a symbol, a culmination of his calculations and intentions. Stepping out of the outpost, he paused to survey the expanse before him. The vast lands stretched out, untouched by his steps, yet inevitably part of his plan. As he began his solitary journey into the distance, his voice, though muffled by the mask, carried a tone of finality and satisfaction. "My calculations were perfect," Winter said, his words lingering in the air like a quiet declaration of impending change. With those words, Simon Winter set off alone, his figure a solitary silhouette against the sprawling horizon. His journey was his own, as enigmatic and profound as the calculations that propelled him. In this realm shaped by gods and tested by conflict, Winter's path was an echo of human ingenuity and determination, a thread woven into the larger tapestry of divine and mortal narratives. As the story closes on Winter's departing figure, the implications of his perfect calculations remain a mystery, poised on the brink of revelation. What unfolds next in this world, reborn from divine conflict and human resilience, is left to the imagination, a realm of possibilities as vast as the universe once shattered, and now perhaps on the cusp of restoration. Coming soon, Crimson Dawn, Season 3, Game of the Gods. The universe has shattered, the balance of power has shifted, and the gods have thrown down the gauntlet in a realm created from the ashes of a once vibrant reality. As the game unfolds, destinies intertwine and fates hang in the balance. Welcome to Crimson Dawn, Season 3, Game of the Gods, where every move is critical and the stakes are higher than ever. Which god will claim supremacy in this ultimate contest of divine will? As Lysanor, Necros, and the vampire god deploy their factions in a strategic battle for dominance, the survival of their very essence is at risk. Will the gods relinquish their power if defeated, or will the lure of supremacy drive them to unforeseen heights of manipulation and conflict? The human stronghold buzzes with life, unaware of its critical role in this celestial game. Will these communities merely serve as pawns for the supernatural factions, or will they rise as unexpected players in the quest for balanced restoration? Amidst this chaos, the brilliant and enigmatic Simon Winter continues his own mysterious mission. With the fate of his beloved Mara hanging in the balance, will Winter harness enough power to alter the course of this divine war? And what of Elder, the new alpha of the Lycans and the Necromancer? Stripped of direct divine intervention, can they adapt and survive? Or will they find their powers waning as the game intensifies? Meanwhile, familiar faces like Alex, Captain Knox, Elena, Marco, Nina and Rebecca find themselves scattered across this new world. Each of them must navigate the treacherous landscapes and alliances that form around them. Will they find each other, or will new allegiances reshape their destinies? Captain Harris, Commander Lewis, and Samantha face their own dilemmas. As leaders of the human stronghold, their decisions could sway the tide of war. Can they protect their people and maintain hope in a world where gods play games with the very fabric of reality? Can the world ever be restored, or will the new realm evolve into something entirely different, governed by the outcomes of this divine conflict? All these questions and more will be answered in the upcoming season of Crimson Dawn. Prepare for a season filled with intense battles, strategic alliances, and the profound drama of survival and supremacy. Join us as the game of the gods unfolds and witness the fate of a world reborn from chaos. Stay tuned for Crimson Dawn, Season 3, Game of the Gods, where the end is just the beginning.